Welcome back, everybody, to the Uncommon Element. I am your host, Josh Meunier, and I'm excited to bring you a series of podcasts right now that really are surrounded by life lessons that I've had over and I'm continuing to learn through my progress and process of my own journey in life. And today I wanted to talk to you about grief. And I don't know about you, I've certainly had ups and downs in my relationships in my life, those really important relationships in my life that have ultimately led to some sort of regret or some sort of grief. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about, where do those feelings come from? I'm hoping that you get something out of this today, because it took me a really long time to figure out what was grief. What is it? What were the emotions that I was feeling that really ultimately led up into this idea of me grieving? I think we've all experienced the loss of a loved one. I think back to high school and college and one of the best relationships that I ever had. It's funny, you may laugh at this, but it was with my dog, Callie. She was this beautiful golden lab. You guys call them yellow labs. She was golden. And she was the first relationship in my life that I felt unconditional love. I don't say that to, make you feel sad. I'm lucky for, who my parents are and what they've taught me. But I also realized that, that is so important in my life is this idea of unconditional love. And it comes from different places. But I felt extremely guilty when I left for college. And I just remember every single time I would come home and have to leave again, her face when I left, of sadness, of I don't know when I'm going to see you again. And I felt it too. And then I realized in my life that some of the most important relationships that I've had those ups and downs of regret to feeling completely loved to grief, that eventually I needed to become more self-aware of what I was doing and what I was putting out into the world, so I could stop with this whole roller coaster ride in my relationships of these emotions. I don't care who you are, how alpha you think you are, you feel emotions. It's there for a reason. It's there to make you better. It's there so you understand and become self-aware of who you are and what do you want. I get fired up about it because I think about how many times grief has reared its ugly head in my life. And I go back to the situations, just like I did with Project Zero, of what is the common element in those relationships and those ups and downs. And it was always the idea that I needed to be right. I felt the need to be right because I was insecure, because I was always constantly trying to prove myself. for acceptance from other people that ultimately gave me zero fulfillment in my life if I got no acceptance or I got no, awards or this sense of significance. I think back to my relationship with my family and I love them. I love my mom and my dad. I'll always love my brother for who he is, although I will never truly have the relationship that I want with him. That's been a huge source of grief for me, is the relationship that I have with my family. Because they are amazing people who only want to help. But what I realize is it's so difficult to help others when you can't understand how to help yourself. And so I really dug into this. I really dug into these emotions. I started to have a true burning desire to get better self-awareness around what was happening with the results in my life and why was I not getting the results that I wanted out of the relationships in my life. And I think about all the mistakes that I made in my last relationship with my partner and not being present and not being there, in what I could have done better to love her more. But what I realized in those instances is when I was in that relationship, I still hadn't fallen in love with myself. And that wasn't fair to her. So I avoided everything. I dug my head into the sand and just consumed my time with work because I had this self-perception that my value was tied to my business and my business only, and I was so wrong. Knowing who I am today versus knowing where I was years prior, I've moved through a massive journey at this point into self-awareness and then self-regulation because I have people around me willing to tell me the truth. I've always been that person that has desired that. Is just the truth. But I also needed to know that I needed to stop being right all the time. I needed to stop jumping to conclusions because the results that I was getting in my relationships were walls. Were me building walls between the people who are extremely important to me and myself because of that feeling that I needed to be right, because I needed to prove myself. And ultimately, it led to disappointment, discouragement, drug use, depression, anxiety, this idea of imposter syndrome. We can't take any of it back. It's one of the stages of grief, right? Is like you accept it. It's the final stage. You accept grief and you accept that loss. You accept the unacceptable, right? Because you didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve those relationships. I didn't deserve the quality that I wanted out of those relationships because I wasn't putting it in myself. I had not developed that yet. And although I wish I could go back in time and take it all back and do everything differently, I can't. You can't buy back time. No matter what, you can't buy back your past. So you have to learn how to live with it, and you have to learn how to accept it. And you have to learn how to move through the different stages of grief more quickly. The way that I've found to be most productive for me is through being more self-aware of my own emotions, of my own moods, and how they affect other people. And what I got to is this idea of, why do I always need to be right? Why? And for what? Like, what effect is it having on the relationships that I have? Because I didn't need to always be right. I needed to be there. I needed to hear somebody else. I needed to see their perspective because my empathy sucked. I don't know if you've ever felt like that, but empathy can be really hard because we start talking to ourselves, or we start being taught early on that, you got to be selfish, unfortunately. Otherwise, you lose all independent thought. And I realized, from my upbringing that, I was always fighting for that, which led me to want to be right all the time because I never felt like I could win. I could make somebody else proud. But I didn't have any pride in myself. I was super ego-driven. Super ego-driven. I took down the awards that were in my office because they remind me of being ego-driven. Sure, I'm very honored that I've had those accomplishments, but when I look back on it, I realized that I did it for someone else, and it was because I needed validation from someone else instead of getting validation from myself. I don't need those reminders in my life anymore. I don't think you do either. So if you're moving through grief because you've lost a loved one, or you've lost a relationship, or maybe you did something last night that you went out and you regretted, you're gonna go through these 5 stages or 6 stages of grief, okay? And in no particular order either, okay? You can go through denial. That's procrastination. It's like numbness. Like, if you ever feel that numbness. And that was me, like building walls, shutting down. I'm sure you felt angry. I know I felt angry, in losing a relationship, angry at that other person because I was pointing my finger at them rather than looking at myself. And then you bargain. You just bargain with yourself because you blame yourself. You feel that guilt. Okay, what could I have done differently in that relationship? You can learn now. You can't do anything about it in the past. You cannot buy that back. I've gone through those states of depression, massive depression. I haven't talked to you guys, much about that yet, but I've gone through some very, very clinically, seriously depressed stages of my life at rock bottom. And when I look back at it, it's actually revolves a lot around personal relationships with significant others and the regret that I felt when those ended. The guilt, the anger with myself. It's really hard. It's really hard to forgive yourself. You just can't forget it. Because otherwise you just don't learn a lesson and you end up with the same results, which means you're a little insane. Okay? I'm gonna claim that too. I'm a little crazy. But I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't. I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't survived 2 near-death experiences, if I hadn't taken risks, if I hadn't had to rebuild myself 5 times over. 5 times over. I don't want to see that for you. I don't want to see you use drugs to numb your pain. I hope that you move to acceptance quicker by accepting yourself and finding that self-awareness within you of those moods and emotions that are holding you back from the results that you want, that you said you want in your life. Because I wasn't doing that for the longest time, and it was leaving me in a spiral effect of just a shitstorm. And it ultimately resulted in an insecurity. I had zero self-compassion. I had zero confidence in myself because I could not build the right relationships in my life because I always felt the need to be right. I don't need that anymore. I need to be right in certain places where my responsibility is to other people and other people's livelihoods, but I no longer feel the need to be right all the time, just to be right. Because that is what is going to make me uncommon. That is what is going to build me and build a life that I want and the relationships that I want, because I realize that relationships matter. And the quality of my life is based on the quality of those relationships. So go out and be uncommon today. And I'll see you there. This is Slick, and I'm out.